We have a very special episode ahead of us because this is the first guest we are having on for this special hot summer. It's getting hotter. Every episode that we record just progressively gets hotter. So we have, unfortunately, Steven Spielberg was busy today. So we are graced with another Stephen, Stephen King, not the author, unfortunately.
This is getting worse as you get into this description.
But he is above both of those Stevens. What we did for this episode, we had a little bit of a competition. We lined up all the Stevens in our lives, and we decided to land on the biggest Jaws aficionado. Also co-host with Michelle of A Pod for Creatives. So we're so excited to have Stephen King on for this episode. Steve, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today. This is a whole different vibe for me.
This is worlds colliding. This is great. It's kind of weird, but also feels right.
Comfortable.
Yeah, because I felt like when we first started Film to Table, I felt like it would be inevitable that we would have Steve on it at some point.
We were saving bringing Steve on for the bloodiest of movies that we've covered so far. So it's going to be great. So Steve, typically we start off these episodes with talking about our memories and experiences. I love that Michelle and I are 10 years apart because I feel like we always have drastically different first memories of watching this movie. So would love to hear from you of maybe the first time you remember seeing Jaws or just like your overall experiences with this movie.
So the first time I saw Jaws was probably around age 10. We used to vacation on Long Island in Montauk, and the vibe out there, honestly, very similar to the setting in the movie. Where it was Amity Island, eerily similar in some capacities. And I can remember one night we had dinner, and after dinner, a lot of times we used to end up just watching a movie, and Jaws was on TV. So the first time I saw Jaws was in a beach setting as a 10-year-old. So I think for like prototypical scary movies, it's probably the scariest like scene that you could have, especially as a young kid. So yeah, my first experience of that was sitting with my family, watching a movie at night. It was on like cable. It was on TV. It was like a Channel 11, like WPIX kind of movie. And it was very real because it was just very similar to what we were like experiencing day to day. So that was really cool. And then there was definitely the thoughts the next morning of like, do I really want to go into the water? And so maybe I should just sit on the under the umbrella today. But
I couldn't think of a better first way to watch that movie. It's so perfect, but it's, like you said, equally as terrifying. After watching it this time, and not that I've been swimming at the beach recently, but I was thinking about going again, and I would be scared to go in after every time I watch this movie. Pools too.
Oh yeah.
But as a kid, that's your thought process for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Like any bodies of water, it's coming to get you. I feel like that was probably very exciting for you to be a 10-year-old, and I don't know what your experiences were with your parents and what you were and weren't allowed to watch, but I don't know if mom and dad would have let us watch this when we were that young. But Michelle, I'm curious to hear your memories and if it was when you were older first watching this movie.
I was a lot older. I don't have a memory of mom and dad saying like we couldn't watch it, but I also have no memory of it ever being brought up. Like, we knew that the movie existed, but definitely have no like childhood ties or memories to it. The first time I saw this movie was only a few years ago, and we were in Cape Cod. I always love going to the drive-in theater when we're there. So I saw that Jaws was playing, and I was like, this feels like the perfect opportunity to like finally see this movie. And it wasn't until we were, had decided that we were going to go see it that I even realized that it kind of has a tie to Cape Cod, kind of like Steve, what you mentioned. The town feels very much like really any beach town in in New England or like, up the Eastern Coast, at our drive-in in Wellfleet, they usually have two movies that show, and the first is usually like more like a family movie, and then they play like the more like adult movie second, and they don't start it till the sun goes down. So the first movie doesn't usually start until like 8:30, sometimes even after that. So by the time Jaws started, it was, I don't know, after 10 o'clock. We stayed for most of it, but I didn't even know what the end was. Like, I didn't know, how much more we had left, but all I knew was I drove, and I was just like, I was getting more and more tired. And the drive-in is, I felt like when we were younger, I thought it was like so far away, but it's still probably like 25, maybe 30 minutes from our parents' house. So I was like, I'm not gonna make it. Like, in order to get us home safely, we cannot stay for the end of this movie. And to my memory, we ended up leaving in the scene where, like, around the time when kind of Quint gives his big speech, which I later found to be very interesting because I did get to finally see that scene, the remainder of what I missed, at least that scene, with Steve, because we were recording a podcast episode, and for whatever reason, Jaws came up. You brought up that scene, and you were like, "We need to watch this right now." So you brought it up on YouTube, and I don't know if I included this in the episode. It might be like in the outtakes, but like we watched the scene that I missed together on the podcast. Since then, I have watched it a few more times, and have grown to love it. So excited to be chatting about it today. But yeah, a really like weird Jaws origin story.
I feel like it's the perfect Jaws, or it beats Steve's even, because you saw it in Cape Cod. You didn't see it when you were younger, which would have been cool if it was like dad brought you when you were 10 to watch it. But I have to get at you though, for you left during that scene. Of all scenes, I know Steve was yelling at you during this podcast recording for leaving. You can't just leave during that monologue.
I don't think it was I think it was before the monologue.
That's worse.
But to be fair, it's like, it's really dark. It's really like, it's night for them. It's like, kind of slow. It's like, watching a movie in a dark room. And we have like, our mom is known for, like, if you put her in a room and turn a movie on and it's like the sun has gone down, she will be asleep within like 5 minutes. And I think that we've definitely like inherited that trait from her.
Oh yes, I have that. And also I'll ease up on you a little bit, because when I was rewatching it this time, and I've seen it a couple times at this point, like in my recent years, but I like paused it and I saw an hour and 30 minutes left. So I was like, what the hell? Oh my God, I forgot how long this is.
All right, okay. Laura, how about you? What's your history? This is continuing with this season, me and Laura having like zero, like we've never talked about this movie before with each other.
Yeah. I haven't had any fun memory stories during the season so far, because I feel like I don't have a first distinct memory of seeing this. But most of my memories are really about Dad talking about how amazing this movie was and how much he loved seeing it in the summer of 75, because it was the same year that Monty Python came out. He went and saw Monty Python and the Holy Grail like a ridiculous number of times. I think he went and saw it in the theaters 8 times, and Jaws was during the same summer. So growing up, he would always talk about it, and it was kind of like Jaws is just integrated into our culture as being very scary, but it came out in the 70s. So I think I kind of missed the boat, pun intended, on this, of like seeing it when I was a kid, and it was more so just something we always talked about. And then I've seen it a lot in recent years. I actually think the first time I sat and watched the entire thing through was during the pandemic, when Dom and I were blowing through a bunch of movies. And then last summer, this is my favorite time that we saw it. We got to watch it at the Academy Museum in Los Angeles, and it's this massive theater. So the screen is really big. We also got to see Raiders of the Lost Ark in there, which is really cool. But it was like very scary because it actually may have been, it was 3D now that I'm thinking about
Oh,
it.
wow.
So it was a full experience. I'll have to send you guys photos of what the inside of the theater looks like. It more so looks like almost like a concert venue. That's how big the seating and the screen is. So I feel like for not having a childhood experience of seeing this, I've made up for it in my adult life. So it wasn't as exciting watching it on my couch this time around, but I think I've gotten my fix of seeing it. Although I would love to see it in a drive-in movie with Michelle, maybe before the sun goes down.
Recently, I would say probably the last half dozen times or so that I've seen it, because I do feel like I watch it like twice a year. Early on, the first time I watched it, the first handful of times, like you're really more concentrated in on the shark because that's supposed to be the scary part of the movie, right? Like you're just focused in on that. Like I can even remember going to what would it have been? You would know this better than I would, Michelle. But is it Universal or Disney where the Jaws ride is? Is it Universal?
Mm-hmm.
So I can even remember because it was 2 years after I saw the movie for the first time that we went to Universal and we did the Jaws ride. And everything is always like at that age, at a young age, it always seems like it's on the shark. And then the older I've gotten, I've realized that like, the scariness really isn't the shark. Actually, the shark is hysterical. Like the more you sort of watch it, because there's storylines that have come out over the years about it where it was a shark that was built on like hydraulics. So it was this kind of like, it was built for fresh water. And of course this was like put into salt water and the thing just malfunctioned constantly. So like now that I watch it at this age, I'm always like looking for like things that are wrong with it than I actually am about being afraid of it. What I really like though, as I've gotten older and I've watched it a number of times, is the relationships between the three main characters, between Hooper and Brody and Quint, and sort of how they come together and then how they sort of help each other, and they almost sort of rub off on each other in some sort of way too. I think Brody sort of at the outset has this very, he's this authoritative figure and this is what he believes in, and then he sort of gets into a situation where he's tasked with leading this. And he realizes very quickly he's got no idea what he's doing because he's working with two people who are better served in that role. And then, you have Hooper, who comes at things from a very scientific standpoint. And, and then you have Quint, who's this just old sea man that, I think has a very more traditional way of approaching things. And as you watch sort of the arc of the movie and the character lines, they all sort of interweave and they all take a little bit of something from each other. And it kind of like marinates into this great story that, they couldn't have done all of this without each other. I know we touched a little bit upon the Indianapolis story with Quint's speech before, but that's really where I feel like that sort of like that meld happens right there, where they sort of share these old tales and of heartache and battle scars and things that they've dealt with, and there's this kind of new forged like, all right, we're in this together. I love that part of it. I enjoy more so the character arc and the relationship melding of the three main characters, because it has become less scary. I think like any kind of movie that you've watched that's a horror movie over the years, like when things are going to happen, so you're not necessarily kind of getting sucked into that, but you really look for more of the human component of the story. And that's, I think now that I've probably watched it, 25 times in my life or, whatever, that's what I find myself being more drawn to, is those storylines.
Stole my answer.
Michelle, how could he steal your answer? You've only seen half of the scene.
It was so impactful.
Liar.
Didn't have to see the other half.
You're like, wow. I read the monologue once online,
memorized
so I really connect to this section.
I can't say too much about it because I feel like you said it so eloquently, but the dynamic of these three characters together is really unique, especially in like a big blockbuster like this. I like it that this movie, while it's known as kind of being like, the godfather of summer blockbuster movies, I feel like it doesn't follow like the formula of most of the movies that came after it, like thinking about like a movie like, like Independence Day or like Men in Black, even, some of the movies that we've covered this season, Raiders. I guess we could say that like Brody is our hero and our main character, but it feels very balanced between the three of them. And it almost feels like there is no hero. It's more about just this experience of these three people who probably would have no reason to hang out together otherwise, coming together to solve this problem, all in the spirit of, kind of like saving the community. I know Hooper's not a part of it, so he doesn't really have an interest in that sense. And, Quint has his own motivations, but ultimately that's what they're doing it for, which leads me into what I would say is my runner-up favorite thing about this movie, and it's just the setting. We were lucky enough, all three of us were lucky enough to vacation in towns that were like this, to be able to go to the beach and experience this kind of like small town beach life. This is dipping a little bit into, I guess we could say, what I didn't like, but I love this town so much and I wanted more of it. And even though, the plot with, trying to fix this shark situation, should be really contained to this one movie. I have no idea what the sequels are about, but I would love to see a series just of other problems that might come up, maybe even putting our mayor at the center of these stories, or having him at least be like the consistent character. But just, seeing different summer stories over time, I would love to see that or write that.
Well, Steve, if you haven't listened to our other episodes, we have this saying, throw it in the idea jar, because Michelle's always like, we're going to write this 3-part series. I think we're up to maybe 14 ideas at this point.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
But I'm in. I'm in.
Cracking. Yeah.
I'm signing up. Michelle, you sort of stole part of my answer of the setting. I think right now the 70s are having such a resurgence, from clothing to music to shows. I'm watching Daisy Jones and the Six right now. So I feel like my favorite thing is just the cinematography. I would have loved to have been the photographer on this film and getting shots of the beach. I always, as scary as the moments are where you're seeing people in the water knowing that the shark is coming with the iconic music, I love the shots of like underneath the water of people swimming. Also, just the opening of this movie is so strong. Like every time I watch it, I had like a summer where I was living on Cape Cod, but like our parties did not look like that, where everyone just sitting around a campfire, smoking joints and having a good time. But I like wanted to place myself in that scene. It just seemed so fun, minus the, getting severed by a shark. But I always loved that opening scene of Chrissy swimming out in the water, because it's so scary. But the ocean has this weird silver shimmer to it, which I think is so beautiful and so different from any other movie I've seen. And I think they just weave in a lot of gorgeous shots throughout this movie. And again, it's not something that I'm able to compare to any other movie during this time period or from recent movies. Even the setting, I was reading that I think the only actual set that they needed to create was their house. And I always love the outside shot of it kind of like sitting on the water. But I think there's a lot of those moments throughout the movie. I had this written down. I was like, wow, it's the nicest police station I've ever seen. But I'm definitely with you, Michelle. I think having spent our summers on Cape Cod growing up, as scary as this setting would have been as a child, knowing that there's a lot of shark attacks, like I wanted more of the town. But I think that the entire half of the movie where they're out in the water, they're also just, the cinematography is amazing. And they have this shot of like the sunset at one point. And I'm always just going after, like, even though I'm not the artist in this group, but I'm always going after like the visual aspects of it. And I think beyond the three of them and their relationship, I couldn't agree more. it's such a strong relationship and plot line because they never would be together. It's like putting the most random people in the most extreme circumstances. Like they're literally shark hunting. It's not a thing. But I love the relationships off the water as well. I think that I love the family. I think the kids are adorable. And you get a lot of these like tender moments of just like wanting to protect each other so that people can enjoy their summer, but also has like the aloofness of the 70s and people just like, it's summer, we're going to go in the water and it's fine, even though someone just died yesterday.
I really love, you had talked about the cinematography. I remember reading that I think it was the first movie that was ever filmed on the water, on boats, like on the water. So like the shots that you're getting have these very like as if you're on a boat, and it made a lot of the shooting very difficult from what I remember reading, and it ended up extending the budget and extending the deadline from when they were. But I almost feel like it's like you had to have it, like it had to be done that way. It couldn't be establishment shots and then things done CGI or things done different. Like it had to be shot that way. So as much as it was sort of a barrier, I think, for filming, you're almost glad, I think, at the end that it did have that feel to it, that you did feel like you were on the boat, that you did feel like you were looking at the, instead of a still line and getting shot, you did see the water sort of rise up and down ever so slightly so they could get the right shot, the right establishment piece.
Yeah. It made me just think of, I feel like this is the oldest story ever told, but if you think about how ingrained this movie is, like in our cultural references, that imagine this movie never got made. And there's so many movies that you hear these stories of it was so difficult to make it. It took years. It was expensive. It was annoying. And I feel like my mind always goes to The Godfather. But I think this is up there. I can't imagine this movie not getting made. So
even though it wasn't maybe like the most effective way to make this movie, I think the fact that they did it in this kind of, old-fashioned way of saying like, no, we're shooting a movie about a shark. We need to film it out on the water, like on real water. It really like it adds something special to it. I need to give a shout out to the character of Ellen and the actress who plays her. I realized this yesterday. I was editing our Jurassic Park episode, and we kind of had a similar sentiment about the character of Ellie. And I don't think that Spielberg gets enough credit for this, but this has come up in every episode that we've covered in this series. Ellie, Ellen, Marion from Raiders. These are not like typical women characters, especially from this era. They're not placed in the story just to be like eye candy or to not have any significance. They're all strong women, but they're interesting women. They're all like really interesting characters. And I found myself like this last rewatch just really kind of like the fact that she's not in like a ton of the movie made me want to know like more about her and this character. And Laura, you kind of brought up like the aloofness. Like at some parts you're kind of like, she wants to protect her kids, but she's not like over the top about it. Like she seems like a pretty chill mom, and I'm saying that like in a good way. I was left wanting more from her. And I feel like I have felt that way about all of the like the leading ladies in the Spielberg movies that we've been covering.
Well, I think that maybe you have to do a Spielberg 6-part series where it's just an episode about each of these characters.
The women of the Spielberg
yes,
films?
The Spielberg women. I couldn't agree more. Like I said, this is a very consistent movie watch for me, and I always look forward to the scenes that she's in. And also, I don't think that she's a character that feels familiar to me. I think that she has like her own approach to things, and she's very funny and sarcastic and doesn't try and take everything so seriously. aside from, when her kid almost died. That's not funny, but absolutely terrifying, because we're kind of thrown into the plot line of them moving there for his job. I would have loved to see in their life living in New York City before or after they captured the shark, like what she's doing the rest of the summer. I just want to be a fly in the wall for their entire family life, especially because the kids are such strong characters in this movie. I just want more scenes with them.
Steve, are all of them, is their family in Jaws too?
Yes.
Do we know what year number 2 came out?
78.
Okay. I always thought that Jaws 2 came out so much longer. So now I'm more enticed to watch it because I want to know what happens.
This one's only an hour and 56 minutes, so you shouldn't feel bad about.
No long monologue. Michelle
Right.
can't watch it. Or Michelle can watch it, actually. This is perfect for her. Yeah, I feel like after I watched it this time, I was enticed to go online and try and find printouts of shots of photography shots from this movie or the beaches, because I'm sure it was a big college poster for a lot of people to have the Jaws movie poster, Well, we would love to hear from all of you, depending on what year you first saw this movie, but we want to know your first experiences. Did you have a beach watch experience? Did you have a drive-in experience? Or did you have a new wave experience? We want to know. Well, I'm very curious to hear from both of you of what you didn't like. We already know that Michelle didn't like the last very important hour of the movie. I'm just going to keep going on with this joke. But Steve, how about you? I mean, for someone who's seen this movie 25 times, I can't imagine there's anything you really hate about this movie.
That's true. I don't think there's anything about the movie that I hate. So nobody likes the mayor, right? So that's obvious, and that's fine if that's what someone doesn't like. Like I can get behind that. It's one of those things where sometimes I have the thought where you're just like, was everybody just sort of like an absentee parent in the 70s? And I think they were. Like, I really do think, like, I've heard stories from my mom and dad too about like things that they weren't really kids at that age, but like even when they were younger, like of how things were done, like just go out and play and leave the house at 9 and come back for dinner. Like that's sort of the vibe. So there are times watching it where I'm just like, man, if people were just a little bit more involved, some of this stuff might not have happened, but then you wouldn't have the storyline. So like, you're fine with that. My biggest thing that I think that I hate is how like a specific line from the movie ends up getting commercialized. And if I'm ruining something for that y'all are going to bring up in a little bit, I apologize, but I'll just briefly touch on it. The whole "we need a bigger boat" piece of things, like it made so much sense in the moment and in the movie, like funny line, like absolutely for the situation that they're in, like nice comedic break in a very like, tense moment. But now like everybody says it, and has said it in these different situations where it doesn't really kind of fit. Like, I think we're going to need a bigger boat, when they're out, like, enjoying just a typical day on a boat. Like, it's a very strange, like, reality that comes out of these moments in movies that, they sort of like take on a life of their own, which I guess is a nice hat tip to Jaws, but it never really feels like it fits the actual like feel of when it was said in the movie.
You're a great guest for this show because we, as a podcast entity, really hate the lines that end up being like said over and over again. Specifically, Laura, I'll let you share the one that annoys you the most. She's brought it up in like every episode since.
I don't even know if I could say it. It's gonna get me all rallied up. We covered a Casablanca, and I hate "Here's Looking at You, Kid." I just feel like it's so misogynistic, and I hate it.
I hate when those things end up happening. It just gets very away from the meaning and the original intent, in the movie. So I'm with you.
I think that after we watch this a few more times, Michelle, this may be a movie that if we had grown up watching this movie, we would have so many subtle lines that we say from this. So we have to build up our portfolio of quotes from this. Yeah, I wonder if this wasn't as popular of a movie. I think that that's a strong line. Like, it's funny, but we've turned it into something else, which is just overkill. So I think if it wasn't as popular, it wouldn't be as annoying to us. But I agree. I think because it's almost like you knew, at least for me, I knew the line before I knew the movie. So when I heard it, I'm like, it feels like when they say the title in a movie very inauthentically, which now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think that they actually say Jaws in this movie at all.
No.
Oh, respect.
Which is why it's a great movie.
Yeah.
You don't need to say the title. We get it. It's about a shark. So, Michelle, what about you? Michelle didn't send me any disclaimers before this recording that she disliked this movie. And I hate when she says that because I want to have an honest reaction when I find out that this wasn't a movie for her. But it seems like you're pretty okay with this movie.
Yeah. Laura's still very scarred from when I showed up and told her how much I hated The Notebook.
Rip my heart out.
Oh, man.
Right?
I mean, I've only
like
seen it
Steve.
once, but that's not something that I would like admit. Like, that's just
Yeah.
something that I feel like in most situations you have to be like, oh, it's fine. Yeah.
Well-
Because I don't want to upset anybody.
Steve's getting promoted, Michelle. You're out.
I had also only seen it once. Watch it again and then tell us what you really think.
Okay.
She did change my mind a little bit, but I won.
All right, fine.
It's a good partnership.
I do really like this movie. Every time I watch it, I like it more. I regret leaving the drive-in early. This is a similar what I didn't like to Jurassic Park in that it's not that I don't like it. It's like I don't like seeing it. I'm okay with Chrissy getting mangled in the beginning. Great, strong opening.
Angled.
Seeing, and not that we even see it, but just like the thought of the dog getting eaten.
I'm laughing because
That's fair.
my first thought was like, oh, she didn't like that the kid died.
No, and that was gonna be my second thing, and the kid. That was upsetting. I feel like made even more upsetting because his name is Alex, our same name as our oldest nephew, and I can picture that scene happening with our little Alex running up to Allison and saying like, "Can I go in the water?" And she's saying yes, and then him being eaten by a shark. That's just like a horrifying thought.
Well, now Allison can't listen to this episode, so good
No,
job, Michelle.
and our nieces and nephews. I mean, I'm already like an extremely nervous aunt. But yeah, God help me next time I'm on the beach with them. Like, can we go in the water? No, no one's allowed in the water.
His hands were pruned. I mean, why is he going in? What is he doing?
That was the time where you knew you had to get out. I mean,
He
that
had
was,
to get out.
Yeah.
She was like,
30 minutes for lunch.
Alex Kinter, you have a couple more minutes. All right. Well, this is a good segue into things that I didn't like. And I don't know why. I don't have an explanation, which is ironic because she was the person that I dressed up as. I don't like Mrs. Kinter. She just rubs me the wrong way. But I have to give her some grief because she's grieving her child. But I just felt like when she showed up at the dock, it was very dramatic. She was like in a covering, like you left your son's funeral to go and yell at someone like on the dock. Like it's just
scene.
very dramatic.
It's very uncomfortable, and she's very uncomfortable because, I know that I mentioned the actress who plays Ellen is not like, I mean, I think that she's beautiful, but she's not like, your typical like female lead. This woman like does not look like she's wearing like any makeup. Like she definitely doesn't look like a someone who's prepped to be in a movie. Like she's very like raw, and in a way, like it does feel very like she feels like probably the most authentic character to me, despite her very dramatic like funeral attire.
Yeah.
In a beach town. But like her reaction and like I felt like her acting was like felt very real to me.
Yes, very authentic. It's more so when I watch movies or shows, and I've brought this up at multiple episodes, there's certain people that I'm like, oh, you're really bothering me. So the mayor takes that top seat in this movie. But sometimes I struggle with this because you're supposed to hate him. So it does work. But I always want a character that you hate, but you like so that he has some redeeming qualities. And there was nothing about this movie, from his stupid suits to his his very dramatic cry at the hospital, which was not real. I think that he's another faker. But yeah, both are great characters and great actors. I get a little itchy when they come on screen. And other than that, this isn't really a thing that I dislike. I think it's actually kind of funny. And I don't know if it was in like an ironic way back in the 70s, but a lot of like male dominant rage in this movie. Like all the men are like, we're going to go out in the water and kill the shark. And like so dramatic. They're like, have all the things. And I think in Spielberg's mind, that was probably really just fun for him to include. But it's just so ridiculous. Like, you guys are not qualified to be doing this, even more so than the three of them going on the boat on this expedition. Also, he has a good point. He's like, why don't we just, if it's dark out, let's go back in. We'll get a bigger boat. He does say that a second time, but it's a little bit more authentic. And Quinn's just not having it. He's like, no, he is attached to this boat, so we are staying. But his demise could have all been avoided if they had just gone back to shore.
Yeah.
Laura, you brought up something else, or reminded me of something else that upset me. I felt bad for like the first shark, not in the sense of the movie, but I listened to this other podcast, which is fantastic. If you're a fan of Jaws, I highly recommend it. The podcast is called What Went Wrong, and it's kind of like a deep dive into all the things that went wrong making this movie. But that shark, the one that they hang up, and that they kind of like recreated, like if you go to Universal, I don't think that the Jaws attraction exists anymore, but I think that they still have the actual, like the little shark statue, was a real shark that they killed for this movie. And that, I guess, in 1975, anything goes, but I don't like that.
Yeah, that's really depressing.
And it's the story. I mean, the story is upsetting as it is. It's like a wild story about how they had to like send people down to Florida, and then they didn't really plan for like how they were going to transport it up to Martha's Vineyard, and how they had to kind of like keep it, on ice, and that didn't really work. So, but it's definitely, I'll link to the episode below.
Yeah. And I just hate that they take a photo with it.
It's so,
yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah. Not
Can
great.
we go back to the mayor for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
One thing that like, yes, agree that his overall character is annoying. The part that I find the most bothersome is, here's this mayor, this seemingly, the way he projects himself as this like long-standing person of this area, and wants to keep the beaches open because it's so important. And people in in that area, in the Cape Cod, that sort of location, like there's a specific accent that I feel like they all have. And here's this guy from North Carolina that just seems like, I mean, that's where he's from, but they cast somebody in like from a southern state, basically, that like, you're just like, I don't buy that you're the mayor of this town. Like you seem like you just came in. So like,
yeah.
Even the casting call on that, like, had the personality that definitely was like annoying, that definitely fit in, that definitely incited like that feeling of like, oh, I don't really like this guy. But there was like underlying things about the casting of that bugged me too.
Is there anyone that comes to mind that you think would have been better cast? Because I've been trying to think of it. Because I do feel like there's someone that could have played that part who wouldn't have been as bothersome to me, but you would have like hated them as a person,
Not to go with a similar theme of show or medium, but Thurston Howe's character on Gilligan's Island, like so older, rich, nasally voice, that kind of like
Mr. Howell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, yes, Mr. Howell.
No, and the wife's name is Lovey. Is
Lovey.
that right?
Right.
I love that.
But he's just like, he's very snooty, and he's very, like all about his money and all about his social scene, and I always like, not that I would feel like, I never thought about it, but when you asked, that's the first name that came to mind was like was that sort of a snob, as opposed to like it seems more like a whiskey drinking kind of like, gambler vibe to this mayor. It doesn't jive with the scene, but maybe that's intentional too. Maybe you wanted him to seem like an outsider because he was going to make all the wrong decisions.
Yeah, I think the mayor in this movie comes off as very cartoonish, which is the
Yosemite
right
Sam like.
the right approach.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could see someone that's a little bit snootier that doesn't get under your skin as much, because he's like really evil. He just bothers me so much. I'm like, oh my God, these people are gonna die.
Yeah.
I'd be pissed. I understand Mrs. Kinter's rage.
That slap is no joke. Like that,
Yeah.
that slap is something that I have rewound and watched as like part of my viewing
slap.
experience, because it's not a sound effect. It's not there's nothing. It is a hit, and it hurt. Like you had, there's no way that didn't hurt in the filming of that. And I hope they did it in one take, but that just looked very real, authentic. And that was, I agree about the acting piece of that. Those are true chops there.
This is always my favorite section of our episodes, but what is your favorite scene and favorite line from Jaws?
So the scene inside of the boat when the three of them are together, and it becomes apparent that, as they're sharing scars and things like that they've gotten from shark bites and whatever else, and it becomes very clear that Quint was on the USS Indianapolis, which, if you're unfamiliar with it, was a military. What's the right word here? It was a vessel, but it was the ship that I believe carried the Hiroshima bomb. They were under attack, and after they delivered it, I think they were on their way back, I believe. You would think from watching this as many times I would remember the plot line, but basically they were under attack. The ship started to sink. All these sailors ended up in the water, and many of them, because of just waiting to be rescued, ended up being attacked and eaten by sharks. So Quint's speech, I think, where he tells Hooper and Brody basically what happened. I've read a lot about how this came about in the movie, and I'm amazed at sort of the development of it. So it was, the way it was written into the script was basically like a monologue. I mean, it was multiple pages on multiple pages on multiple pages. And from what I remember reading, when Spielberg was handing it out, saying to other writers, like, what are your thoughts about this? I think they all kind of came back of like, no, it's too much. No, you can't do this justice. You can't. So they ended up giving it to Robert Shaw, Quint's character, and he kind of looked at it and, smiled. And he's a Shakespearean trained actor. I mean, he's a phenomenally gifted actor, and it's someone that, look him up and look up his credits and look up interviews with him, because he's just brilliant. I think he had it for a night, and he came back the next morning and was like, I think I got it down. And they did it in one take. Legend has it that he was intoxicated for it, and I think you can kind of see pieces and parts of that, but his whole character sort of had that. You couldn't tell whether or not he was intoxicated or not, so it fit really well. But the silence in that scene, I think, speaks more to me, more so than the words, and the words are brilliant. The execution of that speech is just remarkable, but the silence, the reaction shots from Hooper and from Brody, almost in disbelief that the man is still here, let alone survive this, and is talking about this in such a calm demeanor, but with the intensity that he's doing it. And then he's got a line in there where he talks about, in the speech, this goes back to my favorite line. He's got a line where he's talking about the shark, and he describes the eyes of the shark, and he refers to them as doll's eyes.
Sometimes that shark, he looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes.
And it's a line that still stands. It puts the hair on the back of my neck up every time I hear it, because it is the most descriptive, accurate portrayal of a shark's eyes. We've all seen them, and he describes it as they're like doll's eyes. They're just black. When you hear it in the way that he's describing it, it's just, it's chilling. And it is like it's the launch pad to the rest of the movie that I think galvanizes the three of them. And I think it's one of the more underrated, not necessarily as, I don't think it's discussed, when you talk about great films over in time, I don't think it gets nearly as much discussion as it should for one of the greatest scenes ever recorded and never put in a movie. It's the glue to that film in my mind.
I love that you bring up the silence of it because that's what makes it so strong. It's eerie, the fact that no one interjects during that entire monologue too. It reminds me of it's very different because it's a lot quieter, but how they've done so many podcasts and shows about the screaming scene in Psycho. I think, Steve, if they need someone to write a book on that scene, you should be the guy. I mean, you already have the penmanship for it. So.
Evidently, yeah, I have the name, and I might fool them for a little while. Yeah. So,
Laura, you just made me think of, it's not just the silence, but it's like silence, but it's almost like revenance. Is that the right word to use here for Quint? Because I feel like up until this point, I think that he's kind of almost seen like maybe not like an outcast, but like I don't think that he's very well like respected in this town. He's just kind of like this rough around the edges guy, probably known for like, drinking, cursing, maybe even being a little bit of like a menace to society. But yet, like in this scene, as he's giving that monologue, you almost see the other two guys respecting him as he goes on. And I think that that's part of like where that silence comes from.
I also think the reason the scene is so strong, or the monologue is so strong, is the setup of it, because the first time we're seeing the three of them actually get along and joke and let their guard down and drink and laugh, and then they just throw that at you. So I think that they start off with lightheartedness and then they throw you into the deep end, also pun intended. But it just works. I know. I feel like I want to watch it again or read it on actual paper because it's great.
Yeah.
No.
I'm not trying to like give excuses for my early departure from my first watch of this film, but I am glad that I got the opportunity to kind of watch the scene with you, Steve, and for it to be isolated, because I was just focused on that scene separate from the rest of the movie. And you're right. I think it's we talk about the shower scene in Psycho so much. There are other scenes in other movies that like get brought up time and again. And I think that this is like such an underrated, iconic scene in movie history.
Monologue. I mean, you don't see these types of scenes often, where it's this 2.5 minute, 3 minute just monologue that he's memorized and very much has made his own. And I think that's the benefit, like his training as a theatrical, he's also a playwright. Like that's the other thing, like he's a writer. So he understands like, intent and tone and how things were to be delivered. Like perfect actor, perfect words, perfect delivery.
He basically created a movie for us in a movie because he painted such a picture of how terrifying that experience would have been. So I think that's why it has so much resonance. Is that your doubles as your favorite line, I'm guessing?
Yeah. Like the tone of the voice, the doll's eyes. I mean, it's 2 words. It's not really even a line. Like maybe you can extract it out as part of the bigger, a piece of that monologue, but just those 2 words, like doll's eyes, like it is, you see it immediately, you know what he's talking about. And you just realize it's these lifeless eyes. But the juxtaposition is it's with this mammal, is it?
Yeah.
It's
Orca?
Orca, yeah.
Your dress is him?
That's true. The juxtaposition is these lifeless eyes, but it's this killer animal that is just, capable of such destruction. It's wonderful.
Are you sure you're not Stephen King? This was a pretty dark
line. It's true. It's true. That is part of the charm of this movie, I feel like, is when we talked about this before too with some of the touches to it is that it does have a lot of darkness to it, but like there's also these moments that like pull you out, that gives you that sort of sense of humor, like, those hints of like, oh, everything's going to be okay. And then you end up getting like sucked back into this. But this, to me, when you talk about like the scary parts of this movie, like it's not the shark. It's the way that they talk about it. It's the way that they intimate certain pieces and parts of about what a shark is and what it's capable of, that I feel like it makes this movie what it is.
Yeah. One thing I just thought of also is we talk a lot about the silence of the other two characters in the scene. And if you think about being a child and having a scary story told to you where you're just silent and you're sitting there with your mouth ajar, and it's something that maybe impacts you for the rest of your life and you always think about it, they almost become childlike in that scene because they just have nothing to say, but they are locked into everything that he's saying.
Yeah.
So
completely.
It just gets better every time I think about it. Michelle, what about you?
So I think the Quinn's monologue, I would say, is the best scene. But there were two other scenes that I just personally enjoyed in the spirit of this being a
You're gonna say mine.
Film and food podcast. I love the dinner scene. I love, period piece movies, but what I love even more is when the movie is just like made in another era. And the whole just like the lighting in that scene and the plates that they're using and the glasses that they're using feels so familiar. I wasn't born like too far after this, so a lot of that same vibe I think kind of like existed when I was a kid, and I don't know, it brought me back like in a weird way. I think right now stylistically everything is like very like white and bright. We've got like the white kitchens and the windows everywhere. But like during this era, like the 70s and the 80s, everything was like super like dark and shadowy and like brown and green. And it's not my personal favorite aesthetic, but there is still something that's comforting about it because that's like the world that I was born into. I thought that the conversation was kind of like weird, but interesting. I really liked that throughout the whole scene that Brody is kind of like fidgeting with the wine bottle. It's like such a little like tick, but we're going into the scene where he's like, things are not going great. So I think that like tensions are high. He's obviously like, he's drinking, but I think when Hooper comes in, it like makes him even like more uncomfortable. So I love that little detail and that little tick. And I also like the exposition that we get in the scene that I think is done well. I mean, we get like Hooper's whole background and we get the fact that Brody doesn't like water. And the others, this is just a small mention of a scene that I loved, more of just like a snapshot moment. Laura mentioned the Brody and Ellen's, like their bedroom, just gorgeous that they have like all of those windows. Like it looks like it was built like in the middle of the water. Like that's how close it is. But I love the scene where they're in there and they're just like, they're having like scotch or bourbon and he's reading books about sharks. And I was like, this is like an ideal night for me. Sitting around this beautiful background, drinking scotch and reading shark books.
Michelle's an orca girl now. Watches a movie, watches Jaws. Oh, you're so annoying. Stole both of my scenes.
Oh, you had the second one too?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Obviously.
Well, share your
it's
thoughts.
not a surprise. We're cut from the same cloth. No, I'm excited because I feel like I gravitate so much to the off the water scenes, but still partially on the water. I love that you call it the dinner scene because I call it in my head the wine drinking scene. I love the aspect of him taking his current beverage and just pouring wine into it. I feel like wine connoisseurs probably their eyes roll in the back of their heads because they're like, oh my God, it's not in a wine glass. But it just makes him feel like you feel his anxiety and his sadness in that scene. But actually, my favorite shot and moment is the lead up to before Hooper gets there when him and his youngest son are imitating each other. I think that's the most tender part of this entire movie. It's very human. He says, like, give me a kiss. And he says, why? And he goes, because I need it. And I just feel like, and Steve can attest this because you have a son, but I don't have kids, but I can just, I think in all of our movies, and we haven't been able to dig too much into this in this season because it's very action based and exciting. But I always love when filmmakers and writers are able to create characters and moments that are so human, of like, he is so stressed out about the situation that he's in, and he's telling his maybe 3-year-old kid, like, I need love and attention right now from you. And I just think it's so beautiful and so cute. But yeah, that entire scene is great. From the cinematography, I would love to just get a still image of that. And I think the reason I love the scene where he's looking through the books is because we are able to see Helen's energy, like in full throttle, where she's like, stop stressing out, have a glass of scotch, which leads me to my favorite line where she says, you want to get drunk and fool around, which is so great. And then I'm going to cheat and I'm going to say that I also love, Michelle knows this, but Steve, I love strong character introductions and the way that we meet Quinn. Although I hate the sound of nails on a chalkboard, it's such a strong introduction, and his short little monologue there is great as well. I actually love that entire sequence of the town hall, which is the name of our Zoom today, because it has the whole peanut gallery and you're getting everyone's thoughts and behind the scenes. And maybe, Michelle, this plays a little bit into why you would love a series of the townspeople and their stories. But I just love that they're all yelling over each other and everyone's stressed and everyone has different opinions, and they all just stop and turn around and listen to what he's saying. So he clearly has his way of stopping everyone dead in their tracks and being floored by everything that he's saying. Damn, now I really want a Jaws series, an Amity Island show.
Oh yeah. It would be a great place to, like, you know, conceptually, like, I have this thing about going back to places where, like, you know, like I've gone to Woodstock and I just have, like, you know, like in the field where things were, and walking through the town and trying to imagine what that must have been like at that point in time in history, and just sort of sitting with that feeling for a while. And this would be something too where, like, it's fictitious in many ways, but like just to be able to go there now and just sort of be like, I wonder what this was like. Like Michelle and I have talked about this, but these quirks about thinking about places, like I live not too far from Schenectady, New York, but Schenectady was this roaring city in the 40s and 50s, and like trying to think about, like, what must this place have been like all these years ago, and just like sort of being able to go back in time to this area and imagine what that feel would have been like. Because you're not going to see, like, we started the episode, you know, talking about where I saw it for the first time in Montauk. I haven't been to Montauk in 15 years or so, and it's not at all, from friends of mine who still go there, what it was for us as kids when we were there. And I'm sure that this place would kind of be along those same lines. So you kind of lose that sort of, you know, uniqueness to the setting and to the scene that existed in the movie.
Yeah, I think for Michelle and I, growing up and going to Cape Cod, we have very specific memories because we were kind of condensed into just being at our summer house, going to the beach, and then kind of going to our repeat places. But there's this photographer, Joel Meyerkowitz, who lived in Cape Cod in the 70s, and all of his photographs are of Provincetown and these beautiful shots from the 70s. And Cape Cod is very different today. It's actually continuing to change as more, you know, people, Michelle and my age, are moving there and starting lives. But I would love to, like, go back and just be on Cape Cod in the 70s and just be thrown into this feel, you know.
You really want to go to that bonfire.
Yes, I want to go to that bonfire for sure. So I guess I'll just have to fold and rely on photos to understand what it's like.
I have to give my quote. I have two from Quint, but I love the execution of this. he says, cages in the water, you're in the water, sharks in the water. And then he starts singing his like farewell song, which is just, it could not be executed more perfectly.
Oh, so good. I do have a couple more quotes if we have some time. I love of course, all of my scenes involve Helen when they're
Ellen.
it's Ellen. Sorry. Who has been a Helen on one of our past?
Who's only seen this movie once and for half the length?
What? That was Michelle. Our voices sound the same. One of my favorite just moments is when Michael is in the hospital, and which again is very human. Like, she's trying to come off as so quirky and strong and act like she's not worried, but she's like, what do you want? You want me to bring you some cars? And he says, and she's like, what about ice cream? And he goes, coffee. And she goes, coffee. And I just think that's so cute. Like, you can tell we don't get too many scenes with them, but you know that that's how their mother-son dynamic is, that they just joke around with each other and are very sarcastic. I love the kids. I love that their youngest son has such a New York accent. He says, like, come in the house, like, come on. He goes, just a little longer. Like, they have these like great fish out of water accents. Wow, I'm doing great with puns in this episode. But yeah, I just love the humanness and simplicity of the family life. So I guess what we're taking away from this episode is Michelle and I are going to write a mini series about Amity Island and Off the Water. That's what it's going to be called.
Off the water.
Off the water.
I have to say one more
Yes,
Quint one. We
please.
don't even have to include this, but I just want to give it a moment. I like when Quint says, I seen it eat a rocking chair one time.
I love all. I actually do remember that. I love all of him, and that would be another good series. Just him and Hooper, like, not even anyone else. But I love when he says, "Can you like rally those guys and tell them they have too many people on the boat?" And he goes, "Walk straight," and they're like, "Ah, shut up!" Like, and he's like, "Ah, they're all gonna die." Like, it's such like a dark thing that he says.
The two of them too, like in Dreyfuss and Shaw's character, like as people, they were very antagonistic toward, specifically Shaw to Dreyfuss, because I think that Shaw's like, again, his Shakespearean training and you know his presence as an actor and plays. He used to sort of antagonize Dreyfuss, from what I remember reading, where like, you know, they'd be getting ready to like do a scene, and Dreyfuss would be getting kind of, you know, ready, and you know, you hear like, you know, ready on set, all right, ready, and you know, and right before they say action, Shaw would lean over and say something like mind your posture or something like that, to just creep under Dreyfuss's skin a little bit. But that dynamic that existed, which from what I've been reading, that Dreyfuss and Shaw, like, you know, obviously they didn't have a very close relationships as people, but their characters, in a way, you're kind of glad as an audience watcher that existed, because I think it came off more authentically in the film, that sort of that frustration that they had with each other's styles. And, you know, but I agree, like, you know, some of the lines and some of the back and forth and the snippiness, you know, it really made for some comic relief in the middle of very, you know, tense scenes.
You can definitely feel it. It works.
So good. What foods does this film really make us want to eat?
Well, I mean, so I would think that seafood would probably be on the menu in some capacity here. I think a good lobster roll, I feel like, is an obvious one.
I had a dream about lobster rolls last night.
That this is an oddity for you. I feel like that's just a typical night.
And not just a lobster roll, guys, like a table of lobster rolls.
I do like a nice plate of mussels in a red sauce. So for me, I think that would be what I would go with. I think I would do a nice plate of mussels.
Oh, that sounds so good.
With a glass of red with a glass of red.
Not a wine glass though. It needs to be
the Brody glass.
A Brody glass. Oh, I love that. That's a great name, Michelle.
Yeah.
We're also coming out with a
dishware line.
A line of glass.
Perfect.
I too wanted seafood, but I was craving something that I don't know that I've ever gotten on Cape Cod, but we have this like fried seafood slash ice cream. It's really more of a stand out on Cape Cod. It's called Kate's. We've been going there like forever. It's not my favorite ice cream, like by far, to the point where like anytime anyone wants to go to Kate's, I'm like, no. We got to go to Sunday school. That's the superior ice cream place. And I don't think I've ever gotten fried seafood from Kate's, but watching this movie, that's like all I could think about. I'm like, I want to go to Kate's and get like a full platter of like every kind of fried seafood and then enjoy it with like an unsweetened iced tea with like a giant lemon wedge in it.
Ooh. And like a big thing of French fries, right?
Of course. Yes.
And a lot of ketchup, like
yes.
messy.
Yes, messy ketchup.
Oof, that sounds great. I want to know, this is very important. I want to know from our listeners, what is like your favorite ice cream and summer spots of the places that you vacation? It can be anywhere. It could be the Jersey Shore. It could be Cape Cod. It could be outside of the East Coast, but this is important. We need to put together a list so that Michelle can have her seafood craving fulfilled. It's sort of having to do with the movie because they bring up 4th of July a lot, but also I go on a lot of walks in my neighborhoods, and as soon as Memorial Day hit last weekend, I'm not kidding, like it just smells like burgers and hot dogs every time I go on a walk past 4 p.m. So I think we're in the full swing of girl season. And I've been telling Michelle every day, I'm craving a hot dog. I'm craving a hot dog. I'm craving a hot dog. I just want a hot dog real bad. I may have to find one today because I don't have them in.
I have to go buy a hot dog.
This is not, I'm going to go buy a hot dog.
It's the only thing on the list to do.
That's such a good 4th of July. Just like
it is
a nice hot dog, nice cheeseburger. You know, when someone says like, who wants a hot dog? Who wants cheeseburger? I'm like, one of each.
Mm-hmm.
Always. You need
Got
both.
to.
We've been doing a pretty consistent dinner party segment for this season, but we felt like because you were a guest and just having it a different flow, and definitely playing into 4th of July, we wanted to create more of like a potluck style. So imagine we are having a 4th of July like potluck barbecue with the characters of Jaws. And what we're going to do is we're each going to give each other a character, and you have to decide what that character would most likely bring to the potluck.
This is great. This is phenomenal. Yeah.
I haven't eaten breakfast yet, so
this is hard.
I'm having some potato salad and a hot dog after this. So Steve, I'll give you one, you give Michelle one, and Michelle will give one to me. Steve, I'm going to give you Mrs. Kintner. And I have her name spelled wrong on the Zoom. So you have the fun job of assigning Michelle one.
Okay. I'm going to give Michelle Ellen.
Oh, I'm excited. She's going to bring something great.
A women potluck.
Yeah, let's keep this all women. Laura, I'm going to assign you Chrissy before she's eaten by...
Pre-severed Chrissy.
Yes.
I think that severed Chrissy would be more interesting, but that's
then she's gonna it's gonna be harder for her to prepare.
Gonna bleed. What are you gonna bleed on me? Oh, this is fun.
Yeah,
women power for a very male-dominated movie.
Yeah, this is a different trio that we did not get to see.
Yes,
together.
Okay, so Steve, what is Mrs. Kintner bringing to the 4th of July potluck? The women's 4th of July potluck.
Yes. So I think Mrs. Kintner, we only really see her after tragedy strikes her life. So it's very hard to know like who she really is. All I know is what she is from that point on, which seems like a very upset, angry, and rightfully so individual. I feel like she would do something in the potato family. I feel like she would probably bring some type of dense scallop potato dish to the potluck.
That tracks. That really tracks. The denseness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She shouldn't even have to cook. I hope she bought that from the store.
Yeah, right.
Ellen, queen of the movie, I think she's showing up with multiple dishes. I think she's going to come with one of those like ambrosia, marshmallow, jello. I don't even know what else goes in those things. It's like a very weird concoction of random things that they pull off as a side dish from that era. I think she's bringing that. I think that she's bringing a platter of corn on the cob. And I think that even though we saw her, drinking scotch, I think for like a barbecue, she would keep it more appropriate. But I can just see her bringing the fun to the party. I think she's just going to have like a 6-pack of beer, or maybe a case.
I also kind of feel like she's bringing like a punch to get everyone drunk. Like she's bringing both. Almost like, because you know how barbecues last really long, where she is bringing beer to pair with her dense potatoes that she's definitely going to have. And then later in the night, she's like, guys, don't worry, I brought the punch.
I like that. Like a surprise punch reveal.
Yeah, Mrs. Kintner's left and gone home, and now the party can begin.
I don't know. I think they convinced her to stay.
She took the veil off.
She took the veil off.
She really committed to that veil.
She's in a red, white, and blue outfit. She's feeling American.
Forgot about the kid.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Yeah. Oh my God. I feel like Chrissy's very free. So she's bringing something a little different. I don't know, but I also feel like she doesn't. I'm buying time because she's also another one that we don't know very, very long. I feel like she doesn't really know how to cook. So I'm thinking that she may just be bringing like barbecue chicken from a restaurant or like fried chicken. And she's just like, I want to drink beer and have this as like a late night meal. So she's more of a person that's like relying on the rest. You know, there's always one of those who's like, I'll bring something, but like they're either buying it from the store or they're bringing like so maybe napkins. Also she's bringing like an apple pie, like store-bought, which
no,
we like. I would have
store-bought apple pie. No,
why not?
I mean, I would have it,
Ellen's
but
punch, I would have it. And maybe some ice cream. So she's bringing it. And I also feel like she's bringing a thing of joints with her because she's really trying to turn this party up. It was less potent in the 70s than it is now at MedMen and all these places. So Mrs. Kintner's getting into.
One last thing I have to bring up before this episode ends, and I didn't know where to insert this, so this is where it's going. One of us on this call, let me preface this by saying, we've talked so much about what a scary movie this is. Even as adults, if we're not like actually scared, we understand the fear of it. We see a scene in the third act where Hooper goes down. Well, this happens early, but he does it twice, where he actually goes into the water into a kind of like a cage. And I can't believe that this person hasn't brought this up, but one of us on this recording has gone, clearly it's not me because I don't even know what it's called, has gone shark diving before.
Okay.
Share the rationale behind this.
Michelle just always loves to throw in these stories that I'm forced to explain. So Laura today would not have done this. I also think before I did this, I hadn't seen Jaws either. But I was abroad and I was in college and I was feeling adventurous. And when I was in South Africa, I went shark cage diving. And it's pretty interesting because from what a lot of people had said, like it depends on the day. Like you might go out in the water and there might not be any. But yes, I went in a cage.
Like Hooper.
Like Hooper, and I saw a great white. Also the lead up to get there, like we had to leave at like 3 a.m. because you had to drive really far out.
This sounds like a complete nightmare.
This is Michelle's nightmare for sure, but I will remember it forever. It was amazing. And we actually have this shot of like the shark hitting the cage, not the one that I was in. It was someone else, but it's so scary, very risky. I remember my parents being like, I cannot believe that we paid for this. Like, we almost paid for your death.
Yeah, mom and dad who like won't go on roller coasters. Like,
yeah. But I wouldn't trade it. I mean, it was such an awesome experience. And it was, but me and Hooper do have this in common. So I'll have to share some photos.
Yeah, I'd love to see those.
Yeah.
After knowing Jaws better.
Yeah.
And remembering that you did that. All right, Laura, guys. Close us out. What's next in our series? Well, next is the last, right?
Next is the last. We're saving all of our fun guests for our last 2 episodes, so we will have some special guests on. I won't disclose just yet, but we are definitely saving the best for last.
So
Michelle
nervous.
and I really started this podcast just so that we could review Back to the Future Part 1. So make sure you listen in.